Do you guys remember when everyone was diagnosing themselves with like DID and bipolar disorder and like autism and ADHD and OCD during the pandemic was kind of when it was thriving? And I think that that has become something bigger that we aren't really realizing. So obviously, like self-diagnosing has always been a problem. It's always been something that's frowned upon. But I think that the fact that self-diagnosing was frowned upon made people feel like it was their life mission to go out and get this diagnosis. So like they would have one attribute of like some sort of affliction and they would be like, you know what, that has to be me because I have this symptom of this affliction and I'm going to figure out where that comes from and I'm going to go get a diagnosis and I'm sure that I have it. And then they were like, I'm sure that I have this. I haven't been professionally diagnosed. And then people are like, you haven't been professionally diagnosed. You can't just decide you have that. Like there's no way for you to actually know if you have that thing. And it's not fair for you to like join in on that community where people are actually struggling that are diagnosed with that thing. And you can't just really decide that you have that. But because of that rejection and because of that, this is our community, you can't come in. And because it was like, no, you can't just decide that you have autism. You can't just decide that you have OCD. You kind of need a diagnosis. Because of that, people were like, oh, I need to get this professional diagnosis because my own isn't good enough. I think what ended up happening was that because self-diagnosing wasn't okay and that didn't make them valid in this identity that they had like kind of claimed, they made it their life mission to get a diagnosis that was professional. What that meant was kind of building your personality around this diagnosis that you need to have. So like going to therapists and looking up all of the like different attributes of these diagnoses and making a point to express them. Figuring out, okay, what do people with autism act like? What would someone with OCD's answer to this question be? Kind of like people thought, you know, I have this, I know I have this because all of the internet is influencing them. Like, yes, if you're this way, then it must be OCD. Didn't you guys see those like videos that were like, you might have ADHD, take this quiz, like stuff like that, where it's like, okay, you're kind of influencing people to self-diagnose and now people know all of the symptoms and they're actually convincing themselves that they experience these things because they have built their personality around this diagnosis. What ended up happening was that people got the diagnoses because a therapist only sees what you're expressing. You go to a therapist and finally you have this curated version of yourself that definitely you absolutely have OCD, you definitely absolutely have bipolar disorder, and you know that you're expressing all of the symptoms and you know this is the point where you get that official diagnosis that will stop people from saying you're self-diagnosing, and that's become the life goal. So you go to a therapist, you get the diagnosis. If you don't have that thing, you're either facing like medication that directly contradicts what you actually are experiencing, or you're getting like an autism diagnosis. And a lot of times, I don't know if you guys know this, therapists will not directly diagnose someone with autism because it hinders their ability to like get a job a lot of the time. Like if you have that diagnosis on paper, oftentimes it limits your abilities in life. So sometimes even when someone is actually autistic and they are technically diagnosed, a lot of times that diagnosis, if it's not directly hindering their ability to like go throughout their life, that diagnosis will not be recorded on paper. But the thing is like if you're living your whole life wanting a diagnosis, you're not actually experiencing what it's like to grow up with that disability, with that affliction, right? So you don't understand that because no one's telling you that, because that usually happens in adolescence where it'll be like, hey, we're not going to diagnose your kid because it might hinder their ability to do better in the future and like have opportunities in the future. So we're not going to do that. Like that is a conversation that happens, you know, but you don't know that if you're in adulthood and you've decided for yourself that you have this affliction, that you have this learning disability, that you have this whatever, that you're not going to know what the warnings are. You're not going to think about, oh, I don't actually have ADHD. If I'm on intense stimulants, it's going to totally screw up my serotonin because my serotonin is fine to begin with. You don't think about that because you don't actually have the thing you're talking about. I think that that's the real issue with self-diagnosing, is that it happens when you're younger, when you're like more influenceable, when you're more like prone to like assuming that, yes, I must have this thing. And because that was trending so hard on the internet, I think a lot of people were just like, oh, I must have this thing. Well, this person says that if you do this and you do that, then you have this thing. So I do that. I do those things. I must have ADHD. I must have OCD. And then into adulthood, you get that diagnosis and then you have it. Maybe you're medicated, maybe you're not medicated, maybe you feel like you don't really need medication because you're not actually experiencing these things, but the life goal to get that diagnosis is definitely caused by us being like, you shouldn't be self-diagnosing, no, you don't have that thing. And then it was just kind of like a spiral situation. And I want to end this video by saying bean soup theory. So if you self-diagnosed and you actually have that thing, I don't want you in my comments like, I knew I had it and it took me a long time to get a diagnosis. No, I'm talking about people who do not have whatever affliction they're talking about. So I will know if you comment something about like, I self-diagnosed and I found out later in life and it's real. I will know that you didn't watch the whole video. I'll know that you watched 10 seconds of it, got mad, and commented. Just so you know.